All right, time to get started on this 58 Bassman. This is going to feel very nice. So let's cut that neutral, which is really tight, and it's going to the switch. Let's cut that hot, which is fused. Let's cut that ground, which is going to the transformer mounting hardware. And this whole thing will just pull out because you can see there's no grommet or strain relief there. It's just poking through a hole in the metal. I spoke to the owner and refreshed my memory on this amp. When I had it more than 10 years ago, it was one of those things where he needed it for a gig and he didn't have much money, so I just did the things that made it work. The owner of this amp is actually going to be selling this beautiful thing. He's gigged with it for many, many years, and he is retiring from gigging, and it is an intrinsically valuable amp. So if someone is interested in what will soon be a really great, albeit player grade example of a 58 Bassman, get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with him. I will be a middleman, but no finder's fee or anything. I'm going to start by desoldering all the wires going to this rectifier socket for reasons that will become clear later in the process. And because of where the camera is right now, I need to stop because I need to get my elbow where the camera is. People are like, why don't you use the overhead? The overhead doesn't show everything either. And so I'll be, moving the camera around to give you guys the best angle and try not to have the video be a whole bunch of this, like can happen sometimes. But I'm just going to do these two wires here on pin 8 and the two reds on 4 and 6, the same way I just did the one on pin 2 here. And then we'll resume. All right, all that's disconnected. It's really hard to know how much of this will show up on camera. I don't have a macro lens, but there's just so much yuck in here. Just a buildup of dust and funk. And I want to get all this cleaned out. It's really filthy, and it's in and on everything. And like I took out the heater wires from here to here and from disconnected from here. And the heater wires themselves are not just dirty, but they have embedded old shells of bugs which have molted in this thing over the years. It sounds gross if you don't do this, but if you've done this before, if you've done this professionally, the old amps collect all kinds of shells of bugs and egg cases and stuff. It's a warm, dark, safe place, and they like to be there. And I'm going to get rid of all evidence that they have been. Now here, these are both the same point in the amp. There's some modern wires here going to here, and these are just parallel together. And these leads going to the output jacks are just tack soldered, so they're going to go away. And that wire will get replaced. I'm going to be disconnecting everything from the tube sockets and such, and the pots, so I can pull the board out in this video. I want a literal clean slate to rebuild this properly. And again, if you've not done this a few hundred times, first of all, don't do it on a 58 Bassman. It's not a learning experience. But, of course, make sure the amp is unplugged and all the caps are discharged. But you see me disconnecting everything without really slowing down. Unless you know how this is built, unless you can draw the whole thing out in your head in your sleep, take notes, take pictures, make drawings, whatever you need to do. Don't write on the chassis. Don't write on the board. Don't write on the tube sockets, See that all too often. Trying to decide if all this wire from the board to the preamp tubes was originally brown, whether it was originally yellow. I think it was originally yellow and has all gotten really nasty brown in the process of, did I mention bug molting? This heater wire that I just removed will be cleaned up. It's put to the side. It will be cleaned up and most likely reused. If I need to replace any section of the heater wire, I can get the stuff that's just like they used originally. But when possible, I like to reuse the original. I just want it to be clean. All right, we're getting places. All the preamp wires are separated from the tube sockets. There's some output transformer connections I need to undo, and some stuff going to the standby switch next. All right, let's get in here and remove some wires going to the output transformer and the power transformer. And the old solder in these things gets so much dirt built up in a layer on top of it. Sometimes it doesn't take to the iron, as you can see there. So add a little bit fresh. And when I pull them out, I'm not pulling them here, because if I pull them here, it's more likely to deform the insulation. So the heat's over here and I'm pulling them here. When possible, I would use a heat shrink, not heat shrink, heat sink, if there's any exposed wire between the insulation and the eyelet. In this case, there isn't any, so I cannot. Flux, which is part of the solder I use, is inner core of flux, is a cleaning agent. And so by adding that little bit of flux there, makes the old solder flow. I'm just going to lift this diode out here, because it's tight around this wire, but it was just tack soldered here. I mentioned that in the previous video as a point of failure because this wire was so tight because it was wrapped around here. The old selenium rectifier was attached to the chassis here. Once this is all cleaned up, I can use those holes to mount a new terminal strip to mount that diode more securely. Keep stress off it and make it a good, reliable connection again. That'll be nice. This next section should go faster. Let's disconnect this wire going to the board from the standby switch. And now it's time to just start disconnecting the pots. And they were just tack soldered on top, and they're not really secure. I don't know who did that work in the past, but not a fan. It's amazing this amp didn't have tremendous failures in its life with so many unreliable connections. I'm really glad it's come back to me. I have the chance this time to really make everything right. Sorry if the voice in this section doesn't sound that great. I'm leaning over so much and talking into a small rectangular metal box. All the things an audio engineer would say, never ever do for a voiceover, I'm doing. Got nice, odd, parallel surfaces, hard reflective surfaces. Can't stay on axis to the mic and do the work, you know. There's a lot of black on this wire here, as if it got hot, or it might have just been a liquid spill over the years. And there's a mark on the brass panel there where it used to be, and where it absorbed all the funk, so the panel did not. And we'll see how these wires clean up. It's pretty yucky. It's like a oily film on these on these connections on the pots. I think it might have been old WD-40. Not done by me, but really not pretty work, not original. And this bright cap is just tack soldered there. Someone had removed it in the past. I'll leave it on the pot for now. We'll test it with one end lifted like that. I can test it, make sure it's working, make sure it's still somewhere close to 100 picofarad. All right, and able to get so I can pull the board out, I need to remove the 4 input jacks. That one's been replaced. The others seem original. Looking better. And now I need to heat up my big chassis iron and disconnect all the grounds going from the board to this copper or brass panel. So there's one here, one here, one here, and one here. There are 3 more wires to disconnect. These 3 go into the doghouse. They connected to the board up here. I didn't show that, and I didn't show removing the 3 screws to pull the board, but you can see all the little giblets of solder that were between the boards over the years, and just full of dust and dirt. I'm going to pull these tube sockets and get all these metal surfaces really, really clean. But first, let's turn our attention to the board. And I'm going to start removing everything the board that's not original. And some of the stuff that are original, like these 2-plate resistors here, I will remove and then reinstall properly. In this area, you can see that someone took out the original caps, which would have gone from this eyelet to this eyelet, and then had the bias leak resistors diagonally to this eyelet. So they've put in these shorter caps here so they can have the bias leaks here. Very, very short leads, a lot of sensitivity to heat there. And then put in these 1-watt metal oxides for grid stoppers. Now, grid stopper additions are not a bad idea, but they're better to do at the octal socket, like you'd find in AB763. So this is all going to get redone properly, and all these non-original parts are going to come off. And I'm going to see what color this wire was. Was this brown? Was this yellow? If I need to, let me see if I can clean it, or if I need to replace it. I want to replace it with the proper color. So here's one section here that indicates it might have been yellow, right in here. Let me get in here and clean that and see what it turns out to be. It looks like all this wire that's now is this brownish, darkish, greenish, dirtish yuck used to be yellow. And this wire has seen things, man. And there's no difference in this wire and the stuff I used to replace it in this. So I think this might benefit from some fresh wire all around. Make it look like it just left Lupe's bench. What do you think? So I'm going to get started just pulling stuff out. And then I'll clean everything up. Look at that. That's not a good connection. Those were never good connections there. Get the old excess solder off. And I think for this video, I'm not going to show you the entire process. I'll just show you the current state once I get all this done. And then once the parts arrive, we can repopulate properly. Everything off that's not original. That leaves these resistors and these 2 caps. And on the other side, you can see here all these big blobs of solder. These build up over the years, especially in amps that have been reworked a lot. And what happens is if I were to try to solder all this stuff, some of these would inevitably break off and float around inside and can short, they can wedge between them and short things out. Just best to get rid of them all. So I've got a bit more to do. You can also see some of the original color left in these wires. Well, I've got everything out and I've removed the first layers of sludge, literal sludge from this chassis. Just so much dirt and yuck. And I'll get in there and do some more cleaning. I've removed the board. As you saw, the backing board has been all cleaned up. It's ready to go back in. And this board is all cleaned and ready to be repopulated once some parts arrive. So it's a lot of behind the scenes stuff, but it so pays off in the final product. I've got to do things like I gotta pull all the pots and clean all the pots where they make contact with the brass control strip, and all these old RCA jacks for the speaker connections are really, really filthy. Where the metal to metal contact is made. So I've got to clean all these carefully and make sure the phenolic doesn't break. And then I'll put them all back and we'll rebuild it the way it was a long, long time ago. But with actual good contact on all the surfaces. So it will totally be worth it in the end. But that's a good ways from here. But we're closer now than we were, so great. Anyway, hope you found this interesting. As always, thanks for watching.